I enjoy seeing episodes where we get a lot of interaction between all of the main six. Watching their characteristics bounce off of each other is often entertaining. However, in Bridle Gossip, we get both the positive interaction and the negative interaction, so it creates a bit of a mixed bag. The episode begins with Twilight and Spike walking into Ponyville and realizing that no one is around. And of course, no scene like this is complete without the tumbleweed blowing around. Spike actually shows some worry when he thinks it might be because of zombies, and that makes me rather curious. This could very easily just be an overactive imagination coming from Spike. But then again, in a world filled with strange and even unpredictable magic, what if such a thing did exist? But moving on, Pinkie calls Twilight in to join the rest of the main six inside Sugar Cube Corner. And we see Pinkie acting rather unlike herself. She seems rather terrified, as opposed to the giggle at the ghosties Pinkie that we normally see. Twilight is wondering what's going on when Applejack points at a cloaked figure outside. Applebloom asks if Twilight had seen Zecora, and Applejack tells her that she shouldn't be saying that name. Applejack seems to be very protective of Applebloom here, even when Applebloom doesn't seem to show any fear over Zecora. They all take another look outside and see Zecora removing her hood. Twilight says that Zecora is a zebra, and everyone else doesn't even seem to know what that is. So Twilight tells them that she has only read about zebras and that they come from a faraway land. At first, it seems like the rest of the main six are afraid of her because she looks different, and in part that does seem to be the case. But the main reason actually has to do with the fact that Zecora lives in the Everfree Forest. When Twilight asks them what they've actually seen Zecora do, it's quite apparent that none of them have actually seen any evil acts. And I was a little surprised to see Twilight being rather sarcastic here. Usually Twilight is much more reasonable when she's trying to convince others about something. Applebloom is trying to stand with Twilight here, but is still being brushed aside by Applejack. Convinced that she can take care of herself, Applebloom decides to seek out Zecora on her own. She follows Zecora right to the edge of the Everfree Forest when the main six catch up. They immediately begin heckling the zebra when Zecora attempts to warn them about the blue flowers they are all standing in. But by this point, most of the main six seem to be under a mob mentality, refusing to change anything that they believe about Zecora. It seems a bit much that they are so biased towards Zecora here. Granted, their beliefs are not based solely on how Zecora looks. They also seem to be afraid of her because of everything they know about the Everfree Forest. And indeed, that forest is a very dangerous place. I myself am rather curious as to why Zecora would choose to live there. But I'm still a little puzzled by some of the behavior of the main six here. It seems very much like overreactions to gossip. One pony comes up with a wild idea about Zecora, and anyone else who hears it suddenly believes it to be true. Which really does make their actions seem much more like a mob mentality. But Twilight is still not convinced that there is anything wrong with Zecora. That is, until she wakes up the next morning and notices that her horn has become limp and spotted. But even at this point, Twilight still doesn't believe in curses. She starts looking through her books for some kind of illness or allergy that could explain this change. Then Pinkie arrives with a very swollen tongue, Rainbow has her wings on upside down, Rarity's fur and hair has grown out to excessive lengths, Applejack has become pint-sized, and finally Fluttershy has a deep voice. It's really fun watching all of the creative ways that the main six have to deal with their ailments. It makes the episode much more enjoyable just to watch their antics. At this point, Applebloom seems to think that this is her fault and that she should fix it. She doesn't know anything about the poison joke, and yet she wants to go to Zecora's anyways in order to find a cure, which actually says a lot about Applebloom's determination. When the main six notice that both Applebloom and Applejack are gone, they decide to go off to Zecora's in order to find them. Rainbow Dash is still crashing into everything when she is attempting to fly, which begs the question, why isn't she just walking around like everyone else? She knows that her wings are on upside down. Has she really gotten so used to flying around everywhere that she doesn't want to do any walking? When Rainbow runs into Applejack, I find it rather humorous that Applejack starts using Rainbow as her ride, even though Rainbow is still unable to fly in a straight line. But by far, the funniest bit in this whole episode has to be when Fluttershy is singing Pinkie's song and Pinkie is doing all the visuals right beside her.
enchantress and she does evil dances. And if you look deep in her eyes, she will put you in trances. Then what will she do? She'll mix up an evil brew. Then she'll gobble you up in a big tasty stew.
I've watched this scene a dozen times and it's still funny. When Rainbow starts flying around inside Zecora's hut, she starts breaking everything in sight, along with spilling the bubbling cauldron. The rest of the main six come in and start accusing Zecora of cursing them. And at first, Zecora is showing her frustration over all the damage that has been caused, but it doesn't take long for her to go back to the wise and gentle soul that she has shown herself to be. Applebloom arrives and Zecora explains to everyone that their ailments are the result of Poison Joke. And even Twilight has to step back and realize that she had been wrong, as she already had the book with the proper cure back at her library. Even when Twilight was still trying to convince everyone that curses aren't real, she had overlooked some vital information just because the book title sounded weird. Which adds a bit more depth to the moral lesson, and was something that I hadn't remembered about this episode. At the end, Zecora helps the main six to cure the effects of the Poison Joke, which says a lot about Zecora's character. Given the reactions of the rest of the main six, it seems that Zecora had been coming into Ponyville even before Twilight had started living there. And who knows just how many times Zecora had tried to buy supplies in town and was never able to get anyone to open their doors. Given the way she was treated, it would have been very easy for Zecora to just treat the ponies the same way that they treated her. But it speaks a lot about Zecora when she is still willing to help the main six. After they had heckled her at the edge of the forest, after they broke into her home, smashing her possessions and knocking over her cauldron, even after they stood there accusing Zecora of cursing them. Zecora shows a great deal of patience and understanding when she is still willing to cure the effects of the Poison Joke. And throughout the rest of the series, Zecora continues to show herself to be a wise and gentle soul. I'm glad that she has been a part of MLP. I'm also a little more impressed with this story than I was before. It is apparent early on that Twilight was trying to tell the rest of the main six that they shouldn't judge others based on their appearance. But later on in the episode, she makes that same mistake when judging a book by its title. And she is willing to admit her mistake, despite having been so fervent on proving that there was no such thing as curses. As for the actions of the rest of the main six, I was thinking that they seemed a bit out of character when I first watched this episode long ago. But realizing that part of their bias comes from the fact that Zecora lives in the Everfree Forest, it starts to make a little more sense. I myself have been curious about that same fact. And considering how the rest of Ponyville treats Zecora, this seems to be more of a mob mentality than just judging on appearance. I can easily imagine that one pony comes up with a wild idea about Zecora, and the gossip just spreads until others start seeing it as the truth. Which actually lends even more creativity to the episode title. So I actually believe that this episode is a little better put together than I had originally thought. The story isn't all that difficult for me to believe, and all the comedy surrounding the effects of the Poison Joke makes this episode really fun to watch again and again. What are your thoughts about Bridle Gossip? Do you think that the main six are out of character here? Or do their actions fit with what we know about them? Is there anything about this episode that you hadn't noticed before? I would like to hear your thoughts about Bridle Gossip and the lasting effects that this episode has had. And here's to hoping that we can see more antics with Poison Joke in the future. I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.